Oh, she's so funny. Y'all, only Golden Angel can take a book called Chasing His Bunny and make me love it. We're in novella territory with this one, so it's not long. You're not gonna get a ton of plot of depth with this story, but what you are gonna get is me going, sure, bunny shifters, absolutely. I'm all here for it. Bethany has been imprisoned in a lab with her siblings for years. They are being experimented on. She's been changed into some sort of shifter. It's not revealed at the beginning of this, but you might kind of guess by the name of this. And at the beginning of the story, she and her siblings, one sister and a bunch of brothers, are rescued by this team of many different shifters, and they're trying to figure out what to do with them when the leader smells her and goes, "My mate!" She's like, "No, I was a teenager when I was brought in. I'm young. I'm legal. I'm a virgin. I want to bone everything. I don't want a mate. I don't know what a mate is." Of course she doesn't. She was a lab grown shifter. Steele is that mate. He is the head of this military operation that just saved them, brings her back to his pack, which is a small city that he is in charge of. It is a mixed shifter city with lots of different kinds of creatures who all work together in harmony. It's really kind of cool. Steele has to figure out, how do I convince this person that I've just met that mates are a thing, that she's mine, and to please, please, please stop hitting on everyone else. Don't worry, she gets turned down by everyone because Steele is very, very clear that they are mates and no one's gonna mess with that. Eventually, Bethany does come to her senses and they get together because Steele proves himself. It's not just, well, no one else will have me, so I guess it's you. Steele cares for her and for her little sister. He is kind, he's supportive. He lets them participate in the shenanigans that happen when the lab people try to get them back. Instead of hiding her away, instead of tucking her into the corner and not letting her participate and not letting her fight for essentially her own freedom. Finally, she's like, you know what? My lady bits have said no one is as tasty as you. You've proven yourself to me. Let's bone. And that's pretty funny. That was a pretty funny shift. He's like, I don't know. What game are you playing? She's like, no, we're gonna bone. That's the game. The game is boning. The game is that you and I are getting together. And that's pretty much the end of the story. This is the end of the story. There are stories for all the other siblings in this family. So if you are looking for also, there's a little bunny foo-foo. There's some great puns. Some really fantastic puns get made in this story. This is the start of a series. So if you're looking for a mixed bag of shifters with fated mates, this might be the one for you. Thanks. Thank you, Golden Angel. I'll be your teddy baby. I listened to Lost and Lassoed by Lyla Sage. I've listened to the other two Rebel Blue Ranch books rather than read them. It is my favorite so far. Not that the other two weren't great. I've enjoyed the other two, but this one, for some reason, I think maybe she's just getting better as a writer. Gus and Teddy's story just stole my heart. If you've read either of the other two Rebel Blue Ranch books, you'll know that Gus and Teddy do not get along. They're always at each other's throats. They are bickering. They are petty. They are mean to one another. So when the boutique that Teddy works at closes and Gus finds himself solo parenting for an entire summer, Emmy, Gus's younger sister and Teddy's best friend, says, hey, how about Teddy be a babysitter for you, a part-time nanny babysitter thing for you while your co-parent is out of town and while she is looking for work. So she lives with them for part of the week, every week for a summer. So it is forced proximity because they're forced to spend this time together and spend it in a different way than just socializing. Gus gets to see Teddy as a caring, competent babysitter who loves his daughter, and Teddy gets to see Gus as the father who's just trying his best. They are stuck together in their bad days, alone. At the end of the night, they break those previously held beliefs that they had about each other, that they didn't like each other so desperately. I will say that Jason Clarke can whisper teddy baby into my ear always. I feel so creepy. I don't know why, but like a bunch of the books that I've been listening to have featured Jason Clarke as a narrator, and I promise you, I feel like he sees this. I am not obsessed with you in like a weird creepy way. It is not intentional. It's not. You just apparently like narrate books that I really want to listen to. But I, as a human who doesn't like baby as a term of endearment, it's just never something that I've enjoyed, was totally fine with his voice whispering teddy baby. I just, that additional word, teddy baby, made it personal, made it exciting, and made me go, sure, yeah, Gus, whatever you want. This story also involved some toys and some good spice and some will they, won't they, and deep emotional conversation. I loved it. I can't really say more because it's an audiobook and I don't have as many of the nitty gritty moments, those like fine tuned details stuck in my head as I did. It's like so much more about vibes when it's an audiobook. Once they flip that switch from we're enemies to lovers, both of them went, well, this isn't just sex for me. This is real. How are we going to move forward with that? And they move forward real fast. That epilogue, I went, Rissa, whew, my goodness, that is a lot of things that you are putting on the table right now very quickly after having gotten over your dislike of one another. But that is something that I think friends to lovers, or even enemies to lovers, they've known each other since childhood, he's known her almost since birth, can do. When you know someone that well and you flip that and you cross the line, you don't need time. You know them. You can move forward very quickly. Teddy also has some family stuff that happens, and one of the moments with Gus is he's so frustrated because they've just crossed into this new territory of relationship for them, and yet he does not know how to comfort her, and they haven't told their family and friends. So everyone's like, yay, be nice to Teddy. And he's like, that woman was naked in my arms when she got the worst news of her life. Shut up. They have my heart in a way, in a really beautiful way. I loved this audiobook. Oh, oh my God. This book is 5 chili spices. Five of them. This is a book whose plot is the spice, and then the spice just spices constantly. There's no stopping in spice. The spice just spice to spice. This is Heat and Run by Adriana Herrera. This book is an FFF Omega verse romance. There's also some like weird Christmas thing going on. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Christmassy, but it's not Christmassy. If that makes no sense whatsoever, you just have to read this. Mel has been adopted into this family of toy runners, but she's actually this type of other creature human thing that are all women, and she's an omega in that world, and in that world there are alphas and betas and omegas. She's an omega. She's about to enter her first flowering, which is their word for heat, and since she has no partner, she's planning to go to this resort for omegas in this other country land. She has no connection to this other world, but she is one of them, and her adopted family knows that. So she is flying to this resort to experience her first flowering, which is so positive. It's not just breeding, it's your first flowering is you exploring your sexuality and your sensuality and this give and take and what are your fantasies? Let's make them happen. And isn't that what I wish every human's first sexual experience was? Because I really do. I wish that was everyone's first sexual experience, was how can we make you the best, wonderful, most communicative partner ever and have it be wonderful. But anyway, so she's on her way to this resort. Her flowering starts and she ends up crash landing her plane in the backyard of an alpha. Oh no. Daenerys or Dany. And Dany, hears this big crash and goes out and finds Mel, and she thinks, oh no, there's this omega flowering in my backyard. Man, she smells good to me. I guess we better take care of this. Brings Mel into her house and spends her flowering with her together with all of the things, including the list of fantasies that Mel has that they're gonna go with, and the bag of toys that Mel had purchased to bring to the resort for her flowering, and they go through her flowering together. And they've got this insane chemistry. They've got like weird glands that are sensing each other and being like, maybe this person's really great. And then Dany's fuck buddy, Cammy shows up, who's a beta, and walks in the door and says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. We scheduled sex today." And then Danny and Mel are like, she smells great. Maybe we should invite her in." And it turns out they're a triad. So they're just the three of them that are spending time together. That's it. That's the whole plot. That's the whole plot. They're a triad. Look. It's just spice. It's just spice. It's FFF. Well, FF and then FFF. Spice. It's so good. There are a lot of toys. There's a lot of consent. There's a good explanation for why lube is not needed in certain places because apparently it's self-lubricating. So you just gotta go with it at that point. I don't know why I did not expect the spice to spice so spicily, but it did. Not My Type is book 1 in the All Access series by Evie Mitchell. I listened to this as an audiobook. It is very short. It is novella length. As you can see by the cover, our FMC Frankie is in a wheelchair, and that's what this whole series is about. It's people with disabilities that are both visible and invisible. I think this was a great story to start off with. Frankie is a sex therapist with a podcast where she talks about accessibility and intimacy. She gets a listener question about rope play, which she knows nothing about. So she goes to her local dungeon. So lucky that she has a local dungeon. Not every state allows that. If you're in one of those states, you can fix legislation for that. But she goes to her local dungeon and meets Jay, who is an instructor and rope enthusiast. She participates in a shibari class with Jay as the model and discovers something about herself. Also, that she has a lot of chemistry with Jay. She and Jay engage in this friendship of sorts. He comes on the podcast, he helps answer questions about accessible kink, especially rope play. But Jay is really reluctant to date. So at first he says, no, we are just friends, maybe kind of sexy-ish friends. I don't know. Eventually, and it happens so quick because it's so short, they move into a relationship. The conversations that we got to witness about their own sex and intimacy in this story were A+. Frankie is in a wheelchair. She had cancer, she has limited feelings, she has limited mobility from the waist down. Because she's bound in a wheelchair, she also has some health concerns that affect her differently and affect her intimacy differently. One of the things is if she gets a UTI, it's bad news bears. It can go into a kidney infection. It can get really serious really fast. And so for Jay, he always has to be incredibly clean, especially with his hands, if they're going to be intimate down there. And she is going to need to go to the bathroom after intimacy every single time. We have to skip the cuddles. But at a certain point, she goes, I think that the sound of Jay washing his hands is going to start turning me on every time I hear it, because now that's what I associate with him. And we see it. We see Jay, when they start, talking about getting frisky, get up and go and wash his hands and care for her and really prioritize her. He builds her a ramp at his house. But when she's there, she realizes she can't use the bathroom that she can use independently. So she's trying to sneak away to find an accessible toilet. And while she's gone, Jay breaks down a wall in a bathroom so that she can feel welcome in his house. And I think one of the things the story does a great job of is opening eyes to the way that our world is not built for anyone who is anything but perfectly abled. It's eye-opening, and it's hard to hear and it's hard to think about sometimes, but imagine what it's like for Frankie, who can't go over to a boyfriend's house because he doesn't have a bathroom she can use, and she doesn't want to be carried in and out of a bathroom like an invalid. That's her own stuff and she deals with it, but the conversation between the two of them is really important. Yes, about their intimacy, and eventually also about their hang-ups and their needs emotionally from each other. There's a whole group of friends that these next few stories are about. They all have different experiences and different things that they're dealing with in their body. And I want to keep going with the audiobook because I found it really enjoyable. I loved it. Nikki Payne understood the assignment, and the assignment was make Pride and Prejudice relevant in the modern world, and she did it. One of the things about Pride and Prejudice is that the urgency of their situation in the historical timeline doesn't match up with modern times. It's not urgent someone get married. It's not a crisis if they're older and unmarried. They're not a burden on their family. And Nikki Payne did an incredible job of taking that feeling of something needs to happen and change. It is imperative that my life circumstances evolve, and brought it into the modern time. This is set in DC. It's set in the projects, so it's not just two upper class people, one who's incredibly rich and one who's not. It's upper class and lower class between the Bennetts and the other dudes. You know who I mean. Lisa with a Z. Lisa is in the projects with her family, and a nearby project is being torn down and built as bougie housing by a development company, which is run by Dorsey. Oh, Dorsey. And that creates an actual tension, reason for them to butt heads, to not like each other, to be pulled apart. A real reason why, when he says to her that it is absolutely bonkers for me to want you, or for me to keep your sister away from my friend, there is a tangible thing that can have consequences for these two men if they are involved with these two women. I ate it up. And then the fact that they start to connect and communicate and text and exchange and dialogue, that made their relationship understandable. Dorsey, at his heart, he's not a real CEO. He doesn't want to be. He's worked in charity. He joined the fucking Peace Corps, for God's sakes. He doesn't want to run this conglomerate. He wants to run the charity that his late mother had started. And so he's pulled. And he, instead of doing what the board says and putting Lisa down and getting the job done and getting the deal made, he interacts with her and he asks her questions and he listens. And I don't think there's anything more than can be said when he gave her the book. So instead of a gift, instead of an actual Tiffany necklace, something bougie, something billionaire, because he's a billionaire. And I think with billionaires, sometimes the gestures that can be made are so big that the gestures aren't personal. What Dorsey gives her is a book that she recommended on housing with his annotations. He read it. He took her advice and he read something that she told him to, and he dialogues with her about it. And so their relationship and their connection, even though they're on opposite sides of this big thing, builds because they put in the effort. You can see what they're doing with it. I loved the way that she brought in those side characters and also brought them into modern world, where Colin is an upcoming politician, and that's why he's glad-handing and he wants to marry her because she polls well. You know that there are people out there now doing that. It's believable in this modern age. She did such an incredible job with the story that can feel so dated and so floofy. I cared, I worried, I wanted for these characters. I loved it. I'm so mad at myself that it took me this long to read the book when it's been on my shelf for months. Don't be like me. Don't do what I did. I'm telling you now that if you love Pride and Prejudice and you're frustrated because every adaptation for the modern era that you've seen just lacks something, I'm telling you, Nikki Payne found it. Nikki Payne found that something. This is not a bad book. The Wiener Across the Way, which is book 2 in the Kingman series by Amy Award, it in fact checked a lot of great boxes, but for some reason didn't emotionally hit me. To be fair, I read this the first full week of November. And if you're in the US, you know what happened. And maybe I just wasn't able to feel any emotion at that point when I read it. So I'm going to say, here are all the boxes that it checks for me and that I appreciate about this book. I love the way that Amy writes women and bodies. Is just love. It's attraction and reciprocation and different sizes. There's also a community of women who are supporting each other in their physical bountifulness. It's incredibly beautiful to watch. She acknowledges that this is the world that she's creating. It's her fantasy world set in contemporary romance, and I applaud her for that. That is the world that I want to see. I want to see women of all sizes being praised and loved and wanted with a fiery passion. This book is greatly inspired by the real life romance last year of a pop star and a football player. Not that it's wrong, but because that happened in real life, for some reason, this didn't hit me as hard. There's this weird fake dating, not fake dating situation where Kelsey, oh, I should tell you who it is. It's Kelsey and Declan. And they have this adorable meet cute where he saves her dog from a rattlesnake. And her people are like, ooh, you should fake date him. He's like, nah, I don't want to. I want to date you for real. But he doesn't tell her that. He doesn't tell her that, which I think was the weirdest part. He just lets her believe that they're fake dating, but he's dating her for real. And he is so kind and caring, and he just is solid. But it also kind of made him bland. Oh my god, that's it. That's it. These two characters don't feel like characters. They feel like caricatures. Declan has no personality of his own, in my opinion. And honestly, neither does Kelsey. She's the crazy circumstance that she's in rather than a well-rounded human being. I got it. And that, I think, is what made it not hit so hard for me, in a way. Was it bad? No. Was the spice good? Sure. I'm not loving the first time everyone's having sex in these two books. I read the first book. Why would you choose outside on a picnic blanket when you have a bed? There's nothing wrong with a picnic, but like for your first time, I don't know if that's where I would go because there are sticks in the ground. Feels like an odd place for it to happen. I want to continue with this series. I like the way she writes bodies. I like the way she writes women. Honestly, some of these other brothers seem way more intriguing than Declan. That's my opinion. But this one, for some reason, did not hit home for me. It might for you in a completely different way. I'm saying it didn't hit me the way that I wanted it to.